Happy New Year and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman in for Richard French, and tonight we're going to take a look back at the year that's about to end. We're going to talk about the year in politics, sports, news, and we'll also take a look back at some of the people we lost. And I want to begin this New Year's Eve by introducing our panel. We're joined by Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. On the other side of the table, Jerika Richardson is a former spokesperson for Preet Bharara and Mayor Bill de Blasio in New York. And next to her is Phil Reisman. He is a columnist and a radio talk show host. And before we chat with the panel, we want to go back through what was a busy year in politics.
2019 began with Democrats taking control of the House, with the federal government partially shut down. Nancy Pelosi once again making history as Speaker of the House.
I now call the House to order on behalf of all of America's children. Go kids!
The shutdown began in 2018 and lasted 35 days, the longest in U.S. history.
We have reached a deal to end the shutdown and reopen the federal government.
The president backing down, agreeing to a funding measure that did not include money for a border wall. The shutdown fight marked the start of a contentious year between the president and House Democrats. While out on the Democratic campaign trail, the largest and most diverse group of candidates in history looking to oust President Trump from the White House. Former Vice President Joe Biden maintaining a narrow lead in most national polls since the start. The Trump administration's foreign policy this year centered largely on North Korea and the Middle East. In Vietnam in February, President Trump's second meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ending abruptly.
Basically, they wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety, and we couldn't do that.
But 4 months later, history made at the border between North and South Korea. President Trump stepping across the DMZ into North Korea, the first U.S. president to do that.
This was a very positive day, a very positive event, and I think it's good really for the world.
But by the end of the year, little progress on nuclear talks. In October, President Trump announcing he would pull back U.S. troops from northern Syria, infuriating our Kurdish allies.
Let someone else fight over this long, blood-stained sand.
Generating backlash from some of the president's most loyal Republican supporters.
If we abandon the Kurds, it will be to our shame and to our national security detriment.
Just weeks later, President Trump announced the U.S. military took out ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in Syria.
A brutal killer, one who has caused so much hardship and death, has violently been eliminated.
In December, progress on two key trade priorities for the Trump administration, a deal with House Democrats on an updated NAFTA, now called the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement, and an agreement with China on phase one of a larger trade deal.
The tariffs will largely remain 25% on $250 billion, and we'll use them for future negotiations on the phase two deal.
But throughout 2019, controversy loomed over the Trump White House.
That was not a hoax.
Robert Mueller's Russia investigation wrapped up with 37 indictments, including 6 close associates of President Trump, at least 5 prison sentences, and 7 guilty pleas, but no legal action against the president.
Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
And then in September, a bombshell, a whistleblower complaint released, alleging wrongdoing by President Trump during a July phone call with the president of Ukraine, just one day after Mueller testified. Nearly $400 million in military aid and a White House meeting threatened to be withheld until Ukraine publicly announced an investigation into Joe Biden and his son.
The president's actions have seriously violated the Constitution.
President Trump has been consistent. He says he did nothing wrong.
That call was perfect. It couldn't have been nicer. There was no pressure put on them whatsoever.
But over weeks of dramatic testimony in November on Capitol Hill, current and former Trump administration officials said the president, his top aides, and his personal lawyer did just that.
I then heard President Trump ask, so he's going to do the investigation. Ambassador Sondland replied that he's going to do it, adding that President Zelensky will do anything you ask him to do.
On December 18th, the House approving 2 articles of impeachment, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. President Trump now the 3rd president in U.S. history to be impeached. A trial in the Senate is expected to begin early next year.
And you know, guys, watching that piece, Donald Trump was a part of every single story that we just went through there. Now, presidents always dominate our political news, but to me, this was in a way that I don't think I've ever seen before, whether it was the policies or the scandals. Jerika, can you recall a similar president dominating politics like this? And does this help him handling these issues and these scandals?
I definitely can't recall a president taking up so much airtime. It was the year of Trump. Unfortunately for Donald Trump, so much of the coverage of him was not necessarily positive. So I don't know if that really advances him when he's trying to, I think, get the American people on his side when he's up for re-election.
But Phil, when he's the litmus test for everything, when every issue, I mean, even local issues, people wind up talking about Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, he comments on everything with tweets, and you know, every day he's got, you know, a slew of tweets. He'll even comment on football, you know, and make that a controversial thing, you know, with the whole kneeling controversy with the NFL. So that's his, you know, and his whole product, his whole image is to be constantly in the limelight. That's what he does. That's what it's all about. It's an incredible, actually almost ingenious way of constantly putting yourself in the forefront of everyone's consciousness. That's how he does it.
Let's go through some of the stories that we just showed everybody in a little bit more detail. And Dominic, obviously at the end of 2019 we're focused on impeachment, but it may slip a lot of people's minds that we found out about the Mueller report this year. The Mueller report came out, and we got Mueller's testimony this year. Looking back, did the Mueller process help Trump more than it hurt him? Because now with impeachment, there's this sense of, this again, it's more of the same. I don't know.
Well, certainly that's the way his supporters, those that are diehard Trump supporters, are going to see it. In terms of Mueller came in, you know, an independent federal man, special prosecutor, and he didn't find a smoking gun. So this is all smoke and mirror by the Democrats. I don't know if that's necessarily the way it is, but that's the way that President Trump would portray it. And I don't know how good I would agree that he has redefined, that is Trump, the way that American presidents carry themselves. We have never seen a president in front of the cameras, in my opinion, as much as Trump has. But I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. I think it's played out in some horrendous ways for him.
Oh, I don't think it's a good thing. But, you know, I mean, the very fact that he's changed everything in terms of communication. You know, he hasn't had a press conference, a formal press conference, I don't think all year. I could be wrong about that. But what he does do is he does the helicopter on the field thing, where he just takes people that are shouting questions at him with the helicopter in the background, and he can control that much better than he can in a formal setting. I mean, you know, you look at the impeachment, the articles of impeachment, they're so bland. I mean, they're so lacking in detail. But if you really wanted to put the real articles of impeachment out there, it's every outrage that he's committed since even before he took office. And it would be like 40 things, including the wall, and Mexico's going to build it. Mexicans are criminals. Billy Bush in the Access Hollywood, the infamous tape. That's, if you really look at it, that's really behind all the impeachment stuff. It's just that this guy is just one outrage after another.
And I'll add on to that some other things from the year. We had Trump selling out the Kurds in Syria, him pardoning Gallagher despite you know, his platoon saying that he was committing war crimes, the intentional cruelty against immigrants. And
these are all things that are very hard to, you know, put into the category of high crimes and misdemeanors. They're just hard to do.
But he is a master of distraction. You just pointed out, you had all of those people that work for Donald Trump around him go down and be indicted. And he's still sitting out there. But what he is clever at doing is changing the narrative and changing the story from day to day. And we all watch and we all follow him.
Well, let me ask you to follow up on that. Did Democrats spend too much of 2019 in reaction to Donald Trump? Now, we did get a new House majority of Democrats, and Nancy Pelosi got the Speaker's gavel back, and they did pass a laundry list of bills, just prescription drugs, voting rights, civil rights, guns, climate, minimum wage, SALT deductions. Obviously, that didn't get picked up by the Senate, but nobody talks about that, in part because it didn't become law, but also because they spent all year chasing Trump in some ways.
I think they spent the year chasing Trump, I think there was a lot of interest in Trump. Everyone was looking to see what Speaker Pelosi was going to do. And it took time for her to move in that direction. But I really respect how she approached this year. You listed major accomplishments. Now, they didn't get put into law, but that did not mean that the House was not working and that she was whipping up all the members and making sure that they were doing the work of the American people. But she did come around to it, and she came around to it in a very measured way, in a way that would actually, I think, helped a lot of her members who are in those swing districts.
She's also involved in 3 of the most iconic political photographs of the year, and we prepped some of those and put them together. One of them was her at the State of the Union. That's at the top left, giving that sort of not very pleased bit of applause to President Trump. At the top right is her standing in the cabinet room pointing at the president. This is after Ukraine broke. And she said to him, "With you, all roads lead to Putin," which is as best a voiced resistance to Donald Trump as I can picture. And then front and center is her banging the gavel after the impeachment vote. How would you rate Nancy Pelosi, Phil, in 2019? She is essentially the face of the Democratic Party until there's a nominee.
I was just going to say, I mean, rate, I guess, I don't know. If I'm a moderate Democrat, I give her probably an A-. If I'm a progressive Democrat or a left-wing, pseudo-socialist Democrat, I'm probably going to give her a C-. But I will say that just from, try to look at it objectively, she did a pretty good job overall in terms of realizing that, our politics now are so polarized that you're really not going to get anything done right now. And it's just not going to happen. So she did a pretty good job of trying to neutralize the left-wing side of her party. Have you heard from them lately? Not really. She was measured in her attempts to, to deal with Trump, and waited and waited, and she said she wasn't going to call for impeachment until there was solid evidence to do so, and you can debate whether or not this is a case where that is so, but she waited.
I would give Pelosi an A, and I solely define that on being the Democratic face, standing up to Trump. And let's face it, as an opposition leader, she has gone toe-to-toe with him in ways that very few people have. And the year ended with Donald Trump, the president of the United States, on another tweet storm against Pelosi. And the old saying of when your political enemy is in trouble, you just get out of the way. Pelosi is doing exactly that.
I would add another moment, by the way. The one where the reporter asked her if she hated Trump.
That was great.
And she responded by saying, "I pray for the president every day." Although that was an interesting moment.
I think she's a class act.
That got under his skin also.
Really?
He tweeted about it. She gets under his skin like nobody's business. Very quickly, I'll go around the room. Other than impeachment, what will be the lasting political moment, issue, story of the year for you?
I mean, just really thinking about all of the children that have suffered under the Trump administration and the border crisis as it currently stands.
Phil?
I would say that it's the battle between 2 populist extremes in the country right now, and it took center stage with something that's been simmering for a long time, which is so-called income inequality.
Dominic?
The outrageous behavior of the President of the United States, from saying that a woman looked like a horse, that she had a horse face. I mean, we can go on and on. We could do a show just on the outrageous behavior of the President.
That's all. That's all. The underbody of the impeachment.
My vote would go to Mueller's testimony and the crickets around the nation afterwards. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, President Trump has told hundreds of lies and misstatements this year, and that might be an understatement. Drum roll, please. After the break, it is the lie of the year. President Trump tells so many lies. I know we're not breaking any ground here, but several different groups are in fact tracking them. The Washington Post says he's made more than 15,000 false claims since he took office, and this year has been his most untruthful one yet. PolitiFact is also following the falsehoods, and it says that this is the lie of the year, and it earned a full pants on fire.
The whistleblower gave a false account. The whistleblower came out with this horrible statement. Well, the whistleblower was very inaccurate. Defrauded our country because the whistleblower wrote something that was totally untrue.
Not so much, Mr. President. PolitiFact says the president has insisted more than 80 times that the whistleblower's account of the Ukraine call is wrong, total fiction, and made up. None of that is true. A parade of witnesses testified under oath about the call, and they all backed up his account of it, the whistleblowers. A few other whoppers told by the president this year: impeachment is a coup. The Mueller probe was a coup. He likes the word coup. There was serious voter fraud in several states in 2016. He still hasn't given up on that one. Windmills cause cancer. We could go on all night about that one. It does feel like we've almost turned a corner on these lies. I mean, I know the Washington Post said he ramped it up ahead of the 2018 midterms, and he's just been going nonstop. First of all, Dominic, I may ask this all throughout the show. Can you recall any public official who has lied this consistently and been caught this many times and continues to do it?
Absolutely not. I want to be very clear about this. Absolutely not. Every chief executive of the United States has been known to tell perhaps, or let's just say to fudge a fact or two, all right? But at the end of the day, it's a lie. This president, it has become so bad, it's almost per appearance. How many times did he lie about that? And when you talk about the biggest lie, period, how about his relationship with Putin? I think that's all one big lie, where he says, and I'm just being as objective as I can, oh, there's no relationship. We should normalize relationships with Russia. Really, Mr. President?
Even the stupid hurricane map that showed the hurricane going to Alabama. Yeah. Phil, even people in Alabama figured out that was a lie.
Yeah.
We're not on in Alabama, right?
Yeah, okay. That was Hurricane Dorian, and he posed with the weather map that had a Sharpie pen that made it look like the hurricane was going to hit Alabama, which I think maybe he was conflating Alabama with Bahamas, you know, the sort of similar letters. But the thing with him is, first of all, I was surprised he said it was 15,000. I thought it was 12,000. But who's quibbling about lies? But the thing with Trump is, and I'm not defending him, just say that, you know, probably about a third of them, he was saying things that were tongue-in-cheek. And sometimes he says things that you might recognize as kind of I don't know, a joke, or he's using purposeful hyperbole.
Do you still give him the benefit of the doubt for that? 'Cause, I mean, I ended that a long time ago. I mean, I got through the first year and I was like, no more.
Really?
He's a 70-plus-year-old man. He's in control of the words that come out of his mouth.
Well, I'm not saying that he should be making these, I mean, because words matter and people will interpret them the way they hear it. So it's not a wise thing to do, but I'm just saying that probably some of these, a significant portion of them are probably just him using his usual hyperbole. Because don't forget, he's primarily an entertainer. This guy was a reality show host, and so he's using television and the kinds of things like hyperbole in order to be entertaining in some ways. Kind of sick, but that's the way it is.
That's one of the explanations we get from Trump supporters a lot. I'm not saying that you are one. I'm just saying that's one of the ones we get. That's just the way he talks. Yeah. But that also, Jerika, everybody does this. Every politician lies at some point. So it's, do you think they actually believe that, or are they just rationalizing their support of him because he's on their team?
Oh, I think they're definitely rationalizing their support of them. I think all we do when it comes to Trump is try to come up with an explanation or a reason. You talk about TV, well, he spends time when he should be working and figuring out what needs to be done on behalf of the American people. He spends it watching TV. He's on Twitter. Like, his executive time is kind of ridiculous at this point. I mean, this is the man that created alternative facts. So I don't really know what more we can say about him lying. Like, he definitely takes the cake with this one.
How much executive time do any of us get during a weekday? I mean, on the weekends, if I've got a lazy weekend, sure, I'll sit around and I'll catch up on reading. But this guy gets every day. I would love his schedule.
Well, I sometimes wonder when this guy sleeps, because he spends an awful lot of time scheming and an awful lot of time reacting. And I think it's amazing. I mean, this guy probably sleeps an hour a day,
Are there
I don't think he's taking it easy. I think he's blowing up all the time.
Are there any lies that are out of bounds at this point, or that would be too far? We know he's going to explode on whoever the Democratic nominee is, but Dominic, if he tries to convince the public that there's a need for a military conflict this summer during the heat of the presidential campaign, or if he loses the election and claims voter fraud, I mean, is there a too far for Donald Trump?
Well, I'm smiling somewhat sarcastically, unfortunately, because we're talking about the President of the United States. But do you see a scenario where he could accurately convince Americans for the need for military action? I mean, Phil, you hit it on the head. Reality show. Yeah. And I think that a fourth grader on this panel could say exactly what I just said, or what Phil said, that he's a former reality TV star, and he just spins the facts that conveniently fit him. He did the same thing with ratings. Yeah. His show would be third or fourth in the ratings. He would declare he was number one in this time slot.
Fourth grader on the panel. Phil, I'll give you 30 seconds to rebut.
I don't need to rebut. I think Dominic hit it, said it the way it is. So,
anything out of bounds, Jerika? Is there anything that would be too far where people would be like, and I'm not even sure how they would respond to something too far at this point.
I mean, I wish there was something that's out of bounds, but, this country has proven that we just keep on taking it, and he keeps on shoveling it our way.
I was just going to say that sort of behind your question is that he's going to get us into a war with a lie. I find that a little extreme.
I wouldn't put it past him to wag the dog. Absolutely not. If he thought it would help. And on that foreboding note, we'll take our next break. When we come back, we're going to recap the biggest news stories of 2019. That includes fires, floods, and shootings, but there's also some good news that we'll talk about as well. 2019 saw its share of carnage, of national disasters and threats from abroad, but there was also some good news. Here's a look back at the biggest news stories of 2019.
66 below. This is Siberian weather.
Take a look in front of us. That's all you see.
The coldest in a generation.
Is this something that you see often here in Buffalo?
Not this bad. That horrific tornado that hit Beauregard, Alabama.
We lost children, mothers, fathers. You can see what it's doing here.
Dorian, the most powerful storm ever to hit the Bahamas.
Please pray for us.
The devastation here is breathtaking.
Demonstrators taking to the streets to combat climate change.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words.
Massive fires tearing through Southern California.
It's coming this way. We're going to get out.
The Kincaid fire. Evacuations are not suggestions. You are in the path of danger.
The Tick fire burned out of control.
I saw the roof on fire. I mean, you're not going to stop it.
The Getty fire racing towards some of the most expensive real estate.
We got to get out.
The measles outbreak right now, hopefully, is a wake-up call.
A 25-year high.
One person can expose thousands of people.
Don't vape unless you want to end up in the hospital.
19 deaths associated with the use of vaping products.
The new Boeing 737 crashing minutes after takeoff in Ethiopia.
To ground all flights of the 737 MAX 8 and 9.
I can't breathe.
34 people died during this massive boat fire.
Burning, drowning, while inhaling smoke.
5 years after the choking death of Eric Gardner, NYPD officer Daniel Pantaleo will not face federal charges.
Pantaleo needs to be fired!
Officer Pantaleo is dismissed from the department.
Officer Amber Geiger shot and killed Botham John inside of his own home.
It's just been the most terrible time.
Amber Geiger, guilty of murder.
This verdict is for them.
13-year-old Jamie Kloss found alive.
That big hug that I haven't had for 88 days.
A college admissions cheating scandal that's rocked the country.
Do you plan to fight this?
Felicity Huffman sentenced to 14 days in prison.
Actress Lori Loughlin says she's not guilty.
Multi-millionaire Jeffrey Epstein charged with sex trafficking.
66-year-old died by suicide.
I really wanted justice.
Prince Andrew taking a break from his royal duties after scrutiny over the interview about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
There's a shooting at the synagogue.
Please be quiet, please be quiet. I don't want the shooter to know that we're here.
I was centimeters away from death.
Shot fired, second floor.
Carnage at a Virginia Beach municipal building.
We were all just terrified.
It was a long-term gun battle.
Shots rang out at the Gilroy Garlic Festival.
It has to be someone really sick, shining a kid.
Downtown Dayton erupting in chaos.
Deadly chaos in El Paso.
Tragic events will not destroy us.
Conditions at those migrant detention centers.
It is unacceptable for a 16-year-old child to die of the flu.
The government shut down, the longest in American history.
I haven't been paid in over 33 days.
Stepping into North Korea, a first for an American president.
A lot of progress has been made.
North Korea fired off more projectiles.
American forces withdrawing from northern Syria.
See the black smoke trails from Turkish artillery rising.
U.S. Special Forces in Syria taking down the ruthless leader of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
He died after running into a dead-end tunnel, whimpering and crying and screaming.
A massive blaze ravaged historic Notre Dame Cathedral.
Just a nightmare.
Terror breaks out in New Zealand. Gunmen opened fire at 2 mosques.
An extraordinary act of violence.
Nearly 300 killed and at least 500 wounded in bombings in Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday.
Tensions mounting in Hong Kong between police and protesters who are showing no sign of backing down.
One of the most beautiful cities in the world underwater. Venice hit by the worst floods in half a century.
We lose artistic treasures that we're never going to get back.
A giddy Duke and Duchess of Sussex presenting Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor.
I have the 2 best guys in the world, so I'm really happy.
Thousands celebrating a monumental moment from 50 years ago.
The Eagle has landed.
One giant leap for women in space.
Hello, United States.
The first all-female spacewalk.
It's been a long line of female scientists, and we have followed in their footsteps.
So there was some good news in 2019. I mean, totally outweighed in time and volume in that piece by the bad news, but there were some positive moments.
Well, we're not in the, I mean, let's face it, the news business isn't necessarily in the business of reporting all the happy news.
That's fair.
Are there certain channels you can go to?
That is fair. That is fair. I saw running themes in 2 of the sequences of stories, in that we see them all the time. They were utterly predictable, and they happened anyway. All of the climate devastation that we saw, I mean, the first 2 minutes of that piece, or minute and a half of that piece, was all climate-related stuff. And then the mass shootings, which again we saw again and again and again, not just here but around the world, but primarily in the United States. Jerika, I wonder if things are changing on both fronts. If it doesn't seem like people vote on those issues yet, so we're seeing frustration. We're seeing people taking to the streets over both issues, but we're still at loggerheads on them both.
I think we're definitely seeing a raising of awareness. People are talking about both of these issues. I think the challenge is, how are we moving our elected officials to actually acting on all of them? And I think part of it is, I think you have elected officials that care a lot on both sides about these issues, but we just really are not working together. We're not really moving forward. There's just too much division, and that's why nothing's getting done.
And Dominic, it seems like we focus on them in the moment, but as soon as the moment's over, the momentum's gone, and
it seems like we don't even do that anymore, unless if you're talking about mass shootings, unless it's in your region, unless it's in your community. We read the headline, we look at it for 20 seconds on the news, and then we move on. And that's what really scares me. We're looking at a lot of politicians pandering, to say the least, but nothing gets done. Year after year, we've had this conversation about Sandy Hook how many times? And nothing's really been done since then. And it's happening more and more and more. And I'm just fearful that we've become conditioned to just accept this, but not just the mass shootings, also the anti-Semitism. We've done a number of stories on this show about anti-Semitism in the New York area and in Brooklyn, and this year, as we all know, ended with the horrible, horrible, horrible incident in Muncie, New York, with people stabbed by a man. So, it's inside Hanukkah celebration. So I'm worried about the mass shootings. I'm worried about the anti-Semitism and the racism that goes along with that.
And Phil, on climate, it seems like we have a general idea of what the prescription is. We just don't want to pay the bill.
Yeah, well, you just hit on it. It's this idea that if you want to really stop, if you accept climate change, which most scientists do, you have to then look at, well, how do you solve the problem? Well, it's going to take a total, probably, upheaval of our economic system. We have to completely change on how we drive our cars, how we heat our homes. It's a massive overhaul. And I was going to say, when you think about climate change and you think about guns and things like that. I think people have become inured because they don't feel like they have any power to change these issues, these problems. And the fact of the matter is, you mentioned Sandy Hook, maybe Dominic did. You know, that should have been the one. You know, I mean, this was children. You know, and that was how many years ago? 7? So that we can't even keep these things separated. We have to think of them in terms of, oh, that was the one where the children were shot. That was the one where they went into the mosque. That's the one where they went into the Baptist church. They have to be separately branded so you can even keep them straight.
That's exactly how we do it.
And so the truth is, this year we set a record for mass shootings, 41, defined as 4 or more deaths, I think. You know, and it also sort of obscures what's going on in Chicago and some of the inner city places. Chicago is up to now, I think, has this year 2,600 some odd shootings, which you would think would be an all-time record. Well, it hasn't broken last year's record, and you know, and so.
Although to be fair, violent crime rates are still down across the country. Yes, they're in certain spots in certain cities. They're still a problem. Right. I want to use the rest of the segment just because there were some stories that were major stories that took our attention, and I'm not sure I know exactly why they resonated the way they did. The college admissions scandal was a huge story in 2019. Yeah. I get it's the privileged people seeking additional privilege. Jerika, is that why everybody, it seemed like, was talking about it? Is it because people felt like it might impact their kids' ability to get in? Why did we focus on that so much?
I think people were just frustrated, and they're just tired of folks exploiting the system. And you have a lot of people in America, a lot of working class and middle class families that struggle day in and day out trying to make sure their kids have the best opportunity and get access to elite institutions, but oftentimes an institution. And so when they see people that are so privileged, that have everything going for them, still for them not to have that be enough, like you can afford to send your kids to prep classes. You can afford to send them to the best elementary and secondary schools. The path is already laid for them, and yet you still have to find a way to find a loophole or tweak the system to make sure that they still get every advantage, whereas everyone else feels like they're just so far left behind. Like, where's the line?
A fairness issue, yeah, Phil.
Yeah, I think this was an interesting story on a lot of levels, one of which was just the scheme itself, which was amazing, that they were paying this kind of money to pay some guy to gin up the SAT scores or to create a phony resume, you know, being a, I don't know, one of them was like a, you know,
tennis coach, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, some of
crew.
The crew teams, things like that. But also, it's kind of going off what you were just saying, you know, we're also in the context of huge college debt for so many young people in the country. The fact that there was this class of people, many of whom, or some of whom were celebrities, which gave it an extra kick also. We're paying this kind of money, you know, to get their kids into UCLA. I think that was, it's the whole context of the privilege, again, and the debt that so many other Americans are piled up, and it's still not going away.
The other story I didn't get, and we don't have time, unfortunately, is the death of Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, I get why people are interested, but I don't get why they're obsessed with it in the way that some people seem to be. But again, no time for that. Up next, we're going to focus in on sports. Tiger roared back. Major League Baseball crowned a new champion, and a familiar team won the Super Bowl yet again. After the break, 2019, the year in sports. Welcome back. In this segment, we're going to take a look at the world of sports and hear, well, most of the highlights from 2019.
Tiger Woods returned to his brilliance on the golf course at the Masters, ending an 11-year drought and completing his comeback from injury and adversity.
I could still win out here against the best players.
Football also saw familiar faces at the top of the sport. Bill Belichick and Tom Brady led the New England Patriots to a 13-3 win over the Rams in Super Bowl 53 to earn their 6th title. Baseball gave us a new champion. The Washington Nationals repeatedly fought off elimination in their amazing postseason run, beating the Houston Astros with another comeback in Game 7 to celebrate their first World Series title. The Astros losing the series, then coming under investigation for allegations of cheating in 2017. Controversy in the NFL as well. The New Orleans Saints watched their season end on a questionable call. Antonio Brown went to the Raiders, then to the Patriots, but played a total of 1 game in 2019 before being released amid accusations of sexual assault, allegations he denies. Tragedy struck the Los Angeles Angels when 27-year-old pitcher Tyler Skaggs died suddenly of a drug overdose. The team honored him in their first home game where the pitching staff threw a combined no-hitter. Beloved Boston Red Sox hero David Ortiz made a triumphant return to Fenway Park after being shot in the Dominican Republic and enduring 3 surgeries. The NBA also crowned a new champion. The Toronto Raptors rode Kawhi Leonard's clutch performance to win their first NBA title, with all of Canada rallying behind them. The Golden State Warriors' hopes were derailed by season-ending injuries. Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey stirred up trouble for the NBA in China by tweeting support for pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong.
Even though, yes, we do have freedom of speech, but there can be a lot of negative that comes with that too.
California led a seismic shift in college sports, passing the Fair Pay to Play Act and forcing the NCAA's hand to allow student athletes to be paid for the use of their name, image, and likeness once its 3-division finalized the rules by 2021. Zion Williamson dominated for Duke and became the #1 overall pick, but the NBA was forced to be patient as injury delayed his debut for the New Orleans Pelicans. But in many ways, 2019 belonged to dominant women with powerhouse performances. The U.S. women's national team won their 2nd consecutive World Cup, with Megan Rapinoe taking center stage in France. The team also battling off the field in the continued fight for gender equality. Simone Biles made history, becoming the first female gymnast to land a triple-double during her floor routine for Team USA. 15-year-old Coco Gauff went on a magical run at Wimbledon, becoming the youngest player ever to advance to the round of 16. 2019 gave us a lot to remember. The St. Louis Blues going from worst to first, more champions, highs and lows, and the unexpected, as we said goodbye to some of our favorites who stepped away from the game.
That California college law may be the one that changes sports the most going forward. We'll have to wait, and maybe we'll include that in our look back next year. But I want to go around the table. What were the biggest and most meaningful moments in sports for 2019 for you? Dominic, I'll start with you.
That California law should change the way things are done in the future, because these athletes that come from housing projects, and that's not the biggest moment, but come from housing projects and so on, and then, you know, the universities are making millions, billions. The coach is a $5 million man. There's the Nike deal, and all you give the kid is a scholarship. Come on. Biggest moment in sports this year, I hate to admit it, the New England Patriots and Tom Brady. You can never count them out. If they're in the playoffs, there's a chance they're going to the Super Bowl. If there's 2 minutes on the clock and Brady's down 6, you might as well say Saranada, because he's going to score the touchdown and win the Super Bowl.
Is it the greatest run for any team in sports history? Is he the greatest quarterback in NFL history?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one.
Most Super Bowls.
Yeah, most Super Bowls. I mean, if you go based on the definition of winning Super Bowls, then yes.
Okay. And is it? Yeah, well, I'll let you off the hook on whether he's the best quarterback. Phil?
So many good quarterbacks.
Right.
I will say the signing of Garrett Cole by the New York Yankees, $324 million over 9 years.
How much?
It's a record. $324 million.
He hasn't pitched a game for him yet.
No, well, let's just say if he even has the kind of year he had last year with the Astros, that would be $171,000 per inning pitched.
Nice work.
That's assuming he pitches as much as he did last year.
Nice work if you can get it.
Yep.
Jerika, what caught your eye?
Definitely, I love all the stories of women, but the U.S. women's soccer team, hands down, and the fact that they took their win and used it as a platform to push for pay equity, I think I and every other woman in this country is grateful for that.
I agree wholeheartedly. Anytime a sports story goes from being a women's sports story to just being a sports story, and the Women's World Cup team was that. Everybody was rooting for them. I would also point out that in the 4 major sports, we got 3 first-time champions this year. We got the Nationals, the Raptors, and the Blues, which is kind of amazing if you think about it, that there are still towns in the major sports that haven't won titles yet. And having rooted for one that won a couple of years ago, I understand how happy it makes them. So, up next, we will pivot from sports to a look back at some of the lives we lost in 2019. In 2019, we lost a lot of big names in the worlds of politics, sports, show business, and more. Here's a look back at those people and the lives they lived.
Story of my life.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
But I am the better one, I won't let you forget me.
Very interesting.
When we're dancing with the angels, the question will be asked, in 2019, what did we do?
I was Texas born, Texas bred, and Texarkana raised, and when I die, I'll be Texas dead.
We're following two major stories tonight.
It's all I'm trying to do. Hustle and motivate.
I'm very happy for you. Leasing a private jet.
But this is my pizzeria. American Italians on the wall.
That would have been dangerous. I could have taken the subway.
Late addition to that piece, we could put Don Imus on it, the radio host who passed away late in December. I'm going to go around the table, the names that struck out, that stuck in your head, whether personal or from that list. Jerika.
Wow, there were just so many. You ended it with Toni Morrison, and really her words have been the soundtrack of my life and really have inspired me to pursue a lot of the things that I have. I also have to, give credit to Congressman Elijah Cummings, who's opened doors for so many and really has been a statesman and, really was in the midst of all the things that we're seeing when it comes to Trump and impeachment. And I just think he always had such great character and was such a very measured and even man.
Jerika, thank you. Dominic?
A number of people, legends in the civil rights movement, and the piece mentioned several of them. We lost a lot of giants in the civil rights movement.
Phil?
Dr. John, not on the list of musicians, Cajun, New Orleans-based fella, and I saw him at B.B. King's.
And with that, we'll take our final break. We'll be back to wrap things up right after this. That's it for us in 2019. We're back tomorrow night for a look ahead at 2020. We'll see you at 6 o'clock.